From a new school superintendent to a new core curriculum and standardized testing, KPBS education reporter Kyla Calvert joins me with details on how these changes are impacting local schools. Kyla, welcome back.
Thank you.
Early in 2013, a big shakeup in San Diego Unified leadership happened. Tell us about that.
Well, Bill Koba, who had been the superintendent for 3 years in the district, announced that he was retiring at the end of February of last year. And just the very next day, the school board called a press conference at 7:30 in the evening, which is very unusual, and announced that they had his replacement. They appointed Cindy Martin, who was formerly the principal at Central Elementary in City Heights, and in 24 hours had gone through this process of finding a new leader for the district that normally takes months and involves lots of community meetings and nationwide search. They had a meeting amongst themselves and made this decision. So
it was unusual because of the speed, because they had this person identified. How was her appointment received? Was there any feedback from teachers and parents even now at the beginning of the next year?
Well, the feeling about Cindy Martin herself was generally pretty positive. She was already very visible in the community. She had taken a very public stance on avoiding teacher pink slips in 2011 and 2012, I believe it was, and then she had featured in ads for the school district's Prop Z bond. And so people like her, but there was blowback about the quickness of the decision and not involving the community. And Scott Barnett came on and talked with you, and here's what he had to say about that criticism.
It was a eureka moment. We all agree that Cindy Martin is the best person to lead this district. Who better to lead the district on community-based reform than someone who's proven it in the community, who's best to lead this district to improve student achievement than someone who's proven it at her district. So the public will get to comment before the formal ratification and that. But Cindy's probably one of the most publicly known educators in San Diego already.
And I think, Martin is still generally received pretty positively. In October, there was some controversy over whether district hiring was diverse enough, reflecting the diversity of the student body. And we are just starting the budget process for the coming year. And so when there's not enough money to go around, people's opinions about leadership changes.
Absolutely, it does. Now, she took over the city schools about the same time that there was a whole lot of other changes going on nationally, specifically the new curriculum guidelines, the core curriculum. How are they being rolled out here?
Well, so the new guidelines are called the Common Core, and they cover English and math standards. And California adopted them in 2012, but this is the year that they're really starting to be rolled out in full force in classrooms across San Diego County and the rest of the state. And they cover English and math, as I just said, and we went to Monte Vista High School in Spring Valley and visited a math class there to see how it was impacting the way that students are being taught. And that teacher, Christy McAloney, told me that she's focusing a lot more on not just telling students how everything works, but having them figure things out with their classmates. And here's what she said about how they were receiving that.
In the beginning, they were very reluctant. They would just sit there and say, I can't do this. And now when I give them a task, they start on it and they try and they have discussions and they work together. They know I'm not going to give them the answer, so they have to talk to each other.
And so, these new standards focus on things like critical thinking, problem solving, working in groups instead of just memorizing facts and
right, it's a lot more collaborative,
right,
as far as that goes. But that proposes the next question I was going to ask you about. So Common Core also comes with new standardized tests, and that is posing some problems throughout the state.
That's right. Those tests, they're online, they're sort of open response format, which is very different from the old multiple choice bubble-in tests. And so this year, schools in California have the opportunity to pilot those tests, but that plan also includes not reporting test scores. And federal law requires that test scores be published for students in most grade levels in English and math. And so the state's plan was meeting a lot of resistance from the Department of Education, and several $1 million in federal funds that are targeted for testing are sort of in jeopardy because of the plan not to report scores. So they're still sort of trying to tweak that plan to to appease the federal.
Both sides, actually.
Yeah.
A very tough spot to be in. Looking forward in 2014, what can parents, students, and taxpayers expect for San Diego County schools?
Well, California has totally revamped the way that it funds schools, and the idea is to give school districts more flexibility. It's called the local control funding formula. And so instead of tying dollars to specific programs, the funds going to school are mostly based on how many students are enrolled and how many fall into these high needs categories that include things like students from low income households. But with that flexibility, districts have to draw up plans with how they're going to spend their money. They have to show how that spending plan aligns to academic goals, and then show how they're making progress. And so the state's still coming up with the rules for those plans, and districts are going to be drawing them up from starting this month through the spring. So
okay, so we'll follow the money and the Common Core Standard Test. KPBS education reporter Kyla Calvert, thank you so much.
My pleasure.